it should be working because it just said recording in progress. So, yeah, first of all, how are you doing? Are you looking forward to the tour later this month?
Marvelous, thank you, Rowan. Incredibly excited to once more traverse these valleys and hills with my companions four, and deliver this album finally to the people that have stumbled across it and enjoyed it over the past 10 months. Would you believe, at time of recording? So yeah, yes.
I'm also well, and what Ali said.
Oh, good to hear. Good to hear. Yeah, I mean it's funny, isn't it? Because I do know you did a few dates earlier this year in support of the album, and then you did some stuff over in France, didn't you? But this is like your first stand-up tour of the album, isn't it? So I mean, yeah, looking forward to that, I imagine.
Damn right. I mean, it's one of those things where you spend so much time away from it, and when we did those shows, so the first gig that we did standing was weirdly end of the road. We got added like last minute, and it was just like insanely fun, and you kind of forget that aside from everything else and the album and all the other bits that are fun and fulfilling about like what we do, there's nothing in the world more fun than playing shows and traveling around, and you know so yeah, it's just like it's really really exciting kind of getting back to that, because also we're, as a band, like we're a lot better live, I think, than we've been previously. Like it's always been fun, but just kind of like a lot of I know it's just been very much like loose, like kind of going nuts and stuff. Whereas now it's like this actual musical coherency to it. So yeah, no, really excited. It's gonna be cool going back to Bristol, I think, especially actually, because I mean, fuck knows how long it's been, like 3 years maybe.
Okay,
Yeah, it's been ages. And I mean, I guess it was interesting doing those seated shows as well, because we just played the album start to finish, and it was again, in comparison to the kind of loose wild shows before, it was a lot more kind of introspective and considered, and it's not something we'll probably ever have a chance to do again in that kind of capacity. Which, and I think we all really enjoyed it as something completely different to the normal live setting we play in. Especially some of the kind of like some of the songs on the record are a little bit slower and more suited to that setting in a way. So it was interesting to see to be able to perform them like that to an audience that might be, as since they're seated, maybe more receptive to those slightly more introspective moments on the record. But then, as Ali said, it's a blast to be back playing standing shows again as well.
Definitely.
So you don't think you're going to become a lounge band, but you did enjoy that your heyday as a lounge band, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
no, it's good to hear.
Thank you.
Yeah, so on the topic of like the upcoming shows and stuff, I was wondering, because I noticed you'd gone off, done a bit of writing over in France. It looked beautiful, like peak of summer. There's a nice picture of you lot like sat out in the garden. Yeah, do you think will there be new songs and stuff for these upcoming live shows, or is it are you saving that for the future?
That's a very good question, actually. We're kind of scheduling in our sort of like practices and stuff prior to the tour. So we'll see if something comes out of it. The new music's very fucking weird and very, very complicated. So there's additionally going to be a bit more of a okay, we've written this, how the fuck are we going to play this live element of it. But yeah, it should be sorry, shouldn't swear on the radio. Sorry. But yes, so yeah, there's going to be it's going to be weird to work out how we're going to play the stuff live. So maybe it'll take a bit longer. But if we can slip anything new in the set, then I reckon we probably will.
Oh, good. Good to hear. Yeah, just talking more about like your recorded stuff as well. Just wondering how you found recording with Alex Greaves up at the Nave, because he's like the go-to guy, isn't he, for a lot of bands nowadays. I remember like listening to Eagles years ago, and their first album, and like seeing, like, I was like, wow, there's this really cool band from just down the road recording at this like really cool studio. Like, what was your experience working with him? Done a good job. So.
Yeah, it was great. It was, I mean, because previously we'd recorded with Dom Mitchison in Bristol, and it takes a very different stance to Alex, I suppose. So Alex, I would say, was slightly more involved when it came to sort of telling us things were shit.
I've heard that a lot from friends and stuff. Yeah.
And I think, that was good for us. I think and having, being in that situation with more of a producer versus an engineer was really interesting and kind of a learning experience for us. And as well as that, we lived at the studio for 2 weeks, so we got to know the space and Alex quite intimately over that time, which was great because we'd never really done sort of a residency at a studio before like that. So that was so much fun. And, I think we don't often get that sort of long period of time dedicated to doing just music. So that was absolutely brilliant. And we learned a lot from Alex and about how we write music as well. And hopefully it showed.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the album sounds like amazing. So it was definitely a fruitful 2 weeks for you, I think, in terms of product and process. So yeah, sounds good. I mean, are you fans of Yorkshire as well? I mean, we were just saying before we started about Hull and stuff, but yeah, as a whole, as a unit, have you enjoyed your times up north, things like that, up in Leeds and all and stuff?
Absolutely, we're being in Leeds, obviously, kind of on the touring circuit. So while we were up there, we got a chance to see a couple of old friends that were like playing there. So we saw Yowl, who we're very close to, and Ditz, who we're very close to, both of which I believe have recorded with Alex. And we're very good friends with Emily Pilbeam from the BBC Introducing in West Yorkshire a lot. And Bedroom, like it was it was the last time we were up there. We hung out with Ryan.
Sick.
And a few nights over at the Brudenell, which is always lovely. Like big fan of what Nathan does over there. He's like a music venue operator to aspire to. He's he does it properly. He's amazing at what he does. And it's just a great place to drink. You just bump into everyone there, which is always nice.
Yeah, totally.
Nice. So, it's good to hear you've got good opinions of it and stuff. On the topic of Bedroom, you're seeing him tomorrow? I think he'll stop by, playing at Crofters, I think.
Sadly not. Is it? So I'm currently in London, as is Gareth. But yeah, they were at Moth Club. Is it like two nights ago?
Yeah.
I was to go and I was really pissed off, because they're great. They're really, really good and just lovely people. That's another thing with touring. You sort of you make these can make these friendships, and they're really weird because you're like mates, but you only see each other like I know whenever you're touring past each other, like once every 6 months or a year or whatever. So yeah, it's like I don't know. Hopefully, when we're up north, we'll bump into those folks or something. But yeah, I missed them on this occasion.
Oh, bugger! I'll say hello. I'll say hello on your behalf tomorrow.
Please do. Please
speak
do.
to Jordan and Ryan about it. Maybe
Nice.
I think they're the busy bunch bedroom, aren't they? So I'm sure you'll see them again soon.
Absolutely.
Hopefully.
Absolutely.
So yeah, you mentioned about working with Dom as well. Just wondering like what that relationship has been, because you've worked with him for a good bunch of time. Like your first material was recorded with him. So like, yeah, I mean, you did stuff with Greaves, and then you also did a bit of recording with Dom. Was that just like little embellishments or stuff like that you added to the album? Was it sort of due to confidence with working with him before?
Yeah. So we our relationship with Dom. So Dom, one of the first gigs that we went to, as certainly me, Silas, and Gareth, was this show. It was Dom's old band, Velcro Hooks, and we went to the Mothers. Initially, it was a Roll for the Soul, which is it was a bike workshop and cafe. I think it's something else now, but we went there, and security, for some reason, they weren't letting people in. It was like a huge crowd of people outside that wanted to get in and see Velcro Hooks, and they're a great band. So what the promoters, Howling Owl, did, that were kind of, heroes, certainly to me, and like, very big figures in like the scene at the time. They went, we do everything. Let's load in the drum kit and stuff, and let's go to the Mother's Ruin, because they'll just let however many people in. So went there, and they set up upstairs, and the whole crowd moved from that venue to another venue just for Velcro to set. And at the end of it, I can't remember. It was upstairs, and it was so like dangerous, it was just like crown. And I can't remember why it started, but at the end of their set, everybody, like in the front row of the crowd, just charged into the band, like into the drum kit, into the amps, like they weren't there. They just ran into it. And the guitarist and vocalist Jenner, he slashed his head open on like a cymbal, and he came out. He was just like walking around, like hanging out, just like
just
blood
like covered in blood. Yeah, and he's like, "Oh, are you gonna go to the hospital?" He's like, "No, I'm fine. It's all good."
Hang out here. And yeah, so Dom was in that band. That ended up being their last show, because I think they just broke so much equipment. They were just like, "Oh, that's no." Yeah. But yeah, Dom was in that band. He'd produced some of our favorite music in the city at the time. Oliver Wilde. He worked with Giant Swan. He worked with Spectres. He's now a member of Spectres. So he was very kind of respected figure. And the Malt House was kind of the linchpin for a lot of stuff that was happening in Bristol at the time. So we worked with him on some of our early stuff. And when it came to demos prior to working with Alex, we did a bunch of stuff at the Old England. So upstairs in the pool room, we basically Bruce, our drummer, used to live at and manage the Old England. So we'd go there at the weekends and sleep on the couches and get really trashed in the evenings with the scalping lot and stuff, and have barbecues outside, and and kind of make a whole thing of it. But when we came to demo, we used the pool room, which is this big kind of reverby space. Moved the table to the side, and yeah, we recorded some bits there that were kind of so good. And vocal takes, the vocal take from Conveyor is from the Dom sessions. So yeah, it's really nice that he was there right at the start, and he's still got his fingerprints on this record. And yeah, by implication, Bristol and that whole scene from the time.
No, it's good though. It's sort of a nice thread that is sort of woven its way through several years of work, and then yeah, definitely embeds you in the scene a lot more and stuff. It's yeah, it's a good scoop as well. So I didn't realize it had yeah, the album was sort of not just I will go up north to the Nave, blast it out in 2 weeks. It's nice. Yeah, it's cool just hearing it.
Basically was save for COVID happening in the middle, and as a result, a lot of the recording was delayed. In the intervening period, Gareth built the internal memory, the instrument, so we were able to use that on the next round recording. So perhaps disingenuous of us to say, oh yeah, we just like rocked up and just bashed out in a couple of weeks. It was like a lot of weird kind of add-on stuff. But yeah, got there. Yeah.
No, it's yeah, sounds great for all that weird stuff. And so yeah, so I wanted on the show, I wanted to do a sort of Bristol themed episode of sorts. And yeah, of course, you started at Bristol. Is my research correct in that, yeah, you're all, or you two at least, are former UOB students? Then
We all are.
Yeah.
Indeed.
And so, I mean, I was also thinking, like, it may just be drivel, but like, was there any stuff whilst you was at UOB? I mean, could be experiences, but was there any was there any like even lectures or readings that he was doing? He was like, this is actually like really good stuff, and then you found it's like worked its way into you as a band, like helped form it. Or is it been more the experience, the phenomenology of your time at Bristol that informed you?
I mean, lyrically, absolutely. The album Wasteland draws a lot from research I was doing for my master's degree at Bristol, which was all about kind of like early avant-garde art movements. So there's a lot of kind of ideas and the kind of language and like characterizations and stuff draw a lot from the writers like the Italian Futurists and the Vorticists and like the Pre-Raphaelites and Le Barbu and all these and the Nazarenes and all these kind of like movements, and just spending a lot of time at the Bass Library, poring over like letters and diary entries and correspondences from all these dead people, and kind of nicking stuff and using it as a jump off point for the for stuff in the album. So yeah, totally. I mean, lyrically, it's entirely indebted to the stuff I was reading when I was at Bristol, and yeah. Musically, you reckon?
Yeah.
Any things from the Uni G?
It's hard to say musically, not as directly as the lyrical content was inspired, but by virtue of being in Bristol, we were all exposed to so much more like extreme and weird music that that definitely influenced what we were writing and what we were inspired by. And I don't know, I guess because Silas, myself and Bruce were all doing sort of science related degrees, we were all very like analytical and in the way we wrote, and it probably is why we end up writing lots of quite dense, complicated music, because we're always sort of pushing for something more difficult and extreme and complicated.
Yeah.
So not as obvious a link to specifically to our studies, but definitely had an impact in ways.
Definitely, we're all nerds basically.
Yeah.
So starting and studying was like pretty conducive to that.
No, it's good. I mean, it should be proud of being a nerd, I suppose, most of the time. If it works its way into really great music, then clearly not wrong.
Oh, actually, shout out to William Wotton. In second year English, I did a module in creative writing, and I did a poetry thing, and I wrote this thing about we had to do like a villanelle, and I wrote this thing about like somebody getting their arms ripped off by bears, and he gave me like a first for that module, but he like wrote, you're like a deeply tasteless young poet, and he wrote like a thing, and I was stoked on that, and like genuinely that kind of coincided with starting to write the darker, weirder stuff that that would eventually pop up in the kind of like later writings that we were doing, and I was like actually encouraged by the fact that he'd given me a good mark for doing that. So yeah, shout out him for justifying all this.
No, cool. It's very very direct link then, I suppose.
Yeah.
Determining determine the future of your writing, things like that.
Right.
Um,
All the talking dicks and time travel and all down to Mr. Wooten, Professor Wooten.
I'm sure I'll be delighted to know of such an impact on you lot. Yeah, I was just also wondering. It's probably quite obvious, but I mean, do you think LICE would have become a thing if you went to different unis and stuff like that? Do you think in a different timeline almost there would be a LICE out there? Sound very different, or do you think it was just very much like right people, right time?
Yeah, basically. Right people, right time. The fact that we're just all so enthusiastic about really weird stuff and really extreme stuff, and the fact that in Bristol specifically, that kind of there was a lot of stuff for us to walk around in and soak up. A lot of incredibly bizarre. I mean, to shout out a few things that your listeners might, kind of be becoming aware of now. There's like Giant Swan, who were kind of at the time certainly were kind of coming out of being a drone guitar project, and they were using their guitar effects pedals to like make improvised techno, and going to see Bad Tracking, who'd play like butt naked with like a ball gag and like blasting like industrial noise out of cassette machines, and going to see like Harga, which is like the most harrowing and scary and beautiful thing that I've like live show that you'll ever go see. And there was just so much stuff where it's just on any given week you'd walk into a venue and it's just like, oh, I've never seen something like this before. And a combination of that and just what Gareth was saying about, I guess, the kind of like minds that we've got. We certainly wouldn't have been as weird in like another timeline where maybe we're in like a different place or whatever. But yeah, it's like a lot of weird stuff around here.
Yeah, I don't think any other city would have had quite as conducive a scene to the weirdness that came out of LICE.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, that sort of links in with another question I had was like in the early days of LICE, was there any gigs that really stuck with you and proper, catalyzed change for you? Is there any like particular band or something you saw and you was like, shit, well, we can do things differently or can do things like that or whatever? Is there anything that happened like that? Or
I think the earliest one I could think of, which is actually before any of us met, was, I think it was during my first week at university. I don't think, Ali wasn't there because he's in the year below the rest of us, but Silas and I certainly were there. We hadn't met. Was Mets at Start the Bus.
Yeah.
Have you it is quite a legendary show for a long time. I'd just never seen anything as visceral as that. I hadn't really been to any shows like that at all. It was beyond carnage. There was the whole room was essentially a mosh pit. There was way too much broken glass around, so like people were just getting thrown onto the floor and being lifted back up, just like covered in shards and blood. People were swinging from light fittings. Like the band essentially said, "Oh, the stage is ours as much as it is yours. Just don't break any of our stuff." Yeah. And so everyone had this like free reign to do whatever they wanted, and it was like kind of scary, but in a really good way. And then I don't know what about after that, Ali? Was there anything in particular? I suppose there were shows like when we all went to see the Fat White Family together.
Yeah.
At the O2. I'll let you talk about that one.
Yeah, so we kind of taking different paths. We all went to see the Fat White Family on the Enemy Awards tour, I think it was, and I had interviewed them for UBTV, and I had the tour manager's. So I got the tour manager's phone number because he like had to let me in the side door. and yeah, we watched that show, and it was just absolutely nuts. And even at the time, so it was like, it was really bizarre, a band like the Fat White Family sort of, being able to legitimately play on that tour, to play at the O2, and to have like that many people just go nuts for them and like know the tracks, and such, at the time, just a massively transgressive and bizarre project. So we loved them. We were hugely inspired by that. I'd say as a communal point of reference for like, oh yeah, this is what we want to do. They were kind of one of our sort of joint favorite bands in the early days. And we kind of talked when we all first met, and we first talked about starting LICE, or when I first joined. We talked about like, oh yeah, like the coolest thing that we could do, like the absolute, if one day we managed to play with the Fat White Family, that would be sick. So they were coming to town again, and we had, I still had the tour manager's phone number. So I phoned him up and said, hey, I interviewed the band. I'm, got a band now. We're called LICE. We're based in Bristol. Could we open for Fat Whites when they come to the city? And he's like, no, obviously not. And he just like bat us away. And I Andy Dufresne'd him, like from Shawshank. I just rang him every week, or like emailed him. And eventually he just went, okay, fine. If you turn up, you can play at doors for 20 minutes. I'm not paying you. You're not going on the poster. We're not announcing you on socials. But if you come, you can play. And we're like, yeah, like freaking out. It's the best news we've ever had. And then we played that show, and we like came off stage, and they were like Fat Whites, what, like Saul and Leas watched us side stage. They loved it. And like and one of the other bands on that bill was Shame, who were just starting out. So they liked us, and we paired off, and they took us to London for our first shows there. So like, yeah, that Fat White show at the O2, it kind of sort of inspired us to the point where we just like absolutely chance it, and sort of scrappily squirm our way onto these bills in the early days that we had no business being on. Like, we did not deserve to play those shows in the early days. But yeah, that would probably be the other main one, I guess.
Cool. I mean, yeah, it's interesting hearing stories like that, because I remember it was a fair few years ago, wasn't it? That anime tour and stuff. I remember seeing the posters from it and stuff. So it's cool hearing your little stories associated with
Totally.
with stuff like that. And that's another sort of, that leads on quite well to another question I wanted to talk about, was like early days of like getting gigs and stuff, because moving to a new city where you don't know people, you don't know who the right person is to ask regarding gigs, can be really difficult, can't it? So so it sounds like a lot of hard work is how you got on bills originally. Sort of pestering, if you don't mind me saying.
No, it absolutely is pestering. Yeah. We had no idea what we were doing to start. We were emailing venues and messaging bands, and just we didn't really know any of the infrastructure of the industry then. So we were just finding contact emails and pestering people till they told us to piss off, basically. Which is kind of the only way to do it. And I don't know, it's not the only way to do it. It's certainly how we did it, to limited degrees of success. And I would recommend it. I mean, like, a lot of bands, I guess, especially in London, are sort of told like, oh, you've done a couple of gigs, now you need to get a manager and an agent and people who can do this for you. But none of that really existed in Bristol. And so the DIY ethic was so like pervasive there that we never even considered the other way. It was just like, right, tell press you're doing things, try and get on shows yourself, just message everyone you can, telling them you exist and that they should listen to you, even if you're no good. I mean, and I would recommend it to any new bands, because you don't need an infrastructure to start with. You just need to be motivated.
Yeah, exactly. The best thing that we did was because we were really as Gareth says, we were kind of just emailing people and getting nothing back, because it's just another band, and we didn't know anything. As Gareth said, we didn't have a Facebook page, we didn't have a SoundCloud, like, you know, we had nothing, you know, so we were just like, oh, hey, we're a band, can we play your show? And they were like, no, obviously not. So something that we did was we spoke to the Crofters' Rights, and they emailed us and said, well, hey, what you can do is you can hire the venue and you can put on the show yourself. And we were talking about like, oh, well, how do you do that? And putting on a gig is really no different to throwing a house party, you know. In the early days, certainly when you're a student, you just invite all your mates down, everybody gets drunk and, you know, goes a bit nuts, and you play, and, you know, you invite a couple of like other student bands that can't get any gigs like we did to, you know, support us. So we did that, and we like basically, you know, like we like rammed out Crofters, and it was like really our first gig, certainly our first headline gig. So, you know, apart from that, we'd play in like kitchens and stuff. But yeah, we did that. And then we're able to go to Louisiana and say, oh, hey, you know, we did a headline show at Crofters. Could we do the same thing at your place? And they're like, yeah. So we did that. And like Big Jeff came down, and, you know, again, we just like rounded out with like friends, and Big Jeff came down, and, you know, all these like, you know, videos started going around of, you know, people talking talking about us. And then all of a sudden we had promoters getting in touch saying, oh, hey, yeah, it's like this new band in Bristol that's like come out of play nowhere, and they're, you know, they've like got these full crowd. Little do they know that it's just our student mates. So that would be the advice, I guess, from LICE to new bands starting in Bristol: relentlessly pester people, put on your own shows, like hire out a small venue and charge your mates like £2 entry at the door, and, you know, just to cover yourself, and pester people again, and also be good. That's yeah, big that helps as well. But yeah.
No, I'll definitely be taking notes on that and sorting some along those lines. I think every promoter in Bristol will be getting emails from me in a minute after this now.
Nice. Well, I mean, it's a good start knowing to go to promoters, because we had no clue to do that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, what's a promoter? Like,
exactly, we had no idea.
We're emailing the reception at like, you know, like, yeah, just pubs and stuff, like the bookings thing. Like, you know, yeah.
It's the right area, I suppose. I was thinking, like, so talked about the past of life, talked about the present of life. Now, what about the future of where things are going?
So we did these shows in France, and they were absolutely wild and really fun. And then after that, Gareth had this great idea of like finding an Airbnb out in the sticks, like way out in like the French countryside, where we just stayed for a week, like fishing and, you know, like rowing around and, you know, like just hanging out, having barbecues, and, you know, it was really, really nice. And like sort of while we were there, we set up this room effectively as a studio, and we're like very intensely, I mean, Gareth was producing the sessions, like we wrote and demoed like loads of ideas for what will be our next record and the new material. And it was very, very intense. It's probably like the most, aside from all the fun stuff at the edges, like, you know, the actual writing was very much like, you know, going hard in like almost like a working day capacity. And yeah, we got all this really wild, really dark sounding, incredibly complicated music. And yeah, it's really weird. At some point, we're kind of working out at the moment how we're going to finally realize it, you know, and get it all down. And yeah, but the next record is in the works, and it's going to be even weirder than Wasteland. Is the brief. So yeah.
Oh, it's really good to hear. And like, just to comment on your tenure over in France. I mean, you like when you're on tour with people, you get quite close anyway. But I suppose that's the next step in it, where you're literally living together for a week. Like you wake up, you're surrounded by them, you're working with them all day. hanging out with them all the time, and then you go to sleep, and then it's same again next day. I mean, must have got really tight over that week, musically and like socially, I suppose.
Oh, totally. It's just good spending the time together, isn't it, G? You know?
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing, I suppose. It's like you've got to get good at hanging out together as a band. You got almost have to be better at hanging out together than you are at playing music, because there's a lot more time spent hanging out and waiting around and sat in vans than there is playing music. So, you know, you got to get lucky to find some people who can deal with you for that sort of length of time. You know, touring together is a whole different thing from just like playing some local shows, because of that, essentially you need to be tolerant with each other, and it you know, it can be hard for some people.
Yeah, I've seen issues of that nature by many bands, and to varying levels of proximity to which I've seen it. But yeah, can be a bit of friction, can't they? So it's good that you can function amicably.
Totally. Yeah,
I guess it's about being democratic, I suppose, which we've been quite good at. And you know, so you know, a lot of bands don't operate in that way, not because they're bad people, but just because it's just not the way some people like to do music. But you know, that by the virtue of us being democratic in our music, it sort of helps to deal with each other.
Totally.
No, definitely another piece of sage advice, I think, after your comments on getting gigs and stuff. Yeah, just making sure you all get on is very very useful advice to have.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So my last question actually is, and what I want to do with the show is have some Bristol related bands, musicians, artists on, and see if you would like to request a track. It doesn't have to be a Bristol band, but preferably. Sorry, I should have said. It's putting you on the spot for a request. But yeah, if you want, a track or two to be played, one each, I suppose.
To be beamed out to the student masses via the glorious medium of burst radio. What do we think, G? What's gonna spook the?
I don't know. Do we want to spook them, or do we want to educate them on the early days, the early scene?
I was
drop a couple of old nuggets in there.
We could do. My initial thinking was Giant Swan, 55-year-old daughter, but that's kind of a go-to. I don't know if maybe, as you say, it would be cool to.
Well, we could do one of each.
Yeah. Could we do each?
So maybe one each. I was thinking, so.
So with the old song, could either go with Parrots Brook or Severing the Mind.
Wow. I'm down for Severing the Mind.
Yeah, let's do that. That's an absolute banger. So that's Severing the Mind by Velcro Hooks. Harking back to our anecdote of the carnage at Mother's Ruin.
You know, now that you say it, Parrots Brook is the song that got me into music in Bristol, like generally. And like, yeah, that was kind of let's go with Velcro Hooks, but on the understand that you will you solemnly promise to at some point play Parrots Brook on your show.
Will do. How do you spell it? And I'll just send us a link of it also.
Rowan, it's gonna blow your fucking mind. It's so good. And yeah, it's like there's so much good music in Bristol, man. It's like, and yeah, for a newie, what should we go for?
We could go for Giant Swan. That is mind-blowing music.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's go for Giant Swan, 55-year-old daughter.
Lovely, thank you. Yeah, I'll have them queuing after I've played this interview to the masses.
Nice.
Cheers.
I just sent a link. I just sent a link to the Parrots Brook video as well. You watch it and you see like it's just the video just has everyone from that scene in it.
Totally.
Like Joe and Adrian, Lily, Jordan Cook, who went on to play in Telegram, who played in some bands in Bristol before. I mean, the Bunker Hooks guys, just like everyone's in that video.
Totally.
No, thank you. Educating me on the past of Bristol. I thought I knew it all with the pop group, but clearly there's more digging that I need to do.
Absolutely. Howling Owl Records were forced to be reckoned with for a while.
Totally.
Cheers.
Totally.
Thank you for that. I'll stop the video here if you don't mind.